Josh Brown, let's talk about the Xbox Showcase. That was a big old deal.
That was a big old deal. And you know what, Scott Tilford? Bloody loved it, I did. Really liked it.
Massive shout out to everybody for joining us on the video side of things. Please subscribe to the What Culture Gaming podcast. We do a whole bunch of these each week, and we'll take pieces of them to put on the YouTube channel when the discussions are relevant enough, as they are with the Xbox Showcase. I feel like overall, and we mentioned this earlier in this podcast, the rollout of the different showcases, PlayStation's was pretty much despised. Summer Games Fest, bit of a mix. And so far with Xbox, it's massively positive. A few people in there sort of...
Is that right?
Well, I think so. What I've seen is mostly positive.
Oh, I mean, I'm genuinely asking you there because I've not been keeping up with it. I heard that the PlayStation Fallout, like you said, was not great, and now going into Xbox, I actually haven't put my little feelers out to see what the reception is, so that's really exciting.
So far, so good. I feel like a lot of people were initially blown away by Fable. Obviously, it was maxed out in terms of just seeing gameplay. What's the future of Xbox? Do they have something to get excited about? Starfield, thankfully, coming together. Cross all the fingers, pray to all the gods. It seems like it'll be extremely solid. But general thoughts on this, and then we'll run some stuff down.
Loved it, man. Yeah. I really did. Like, I think they started strong with the first 3 games that they announced, and they kind of just kept the ball rolling for me. I love a conference, I said this earlier, that gives me what I want alongside what I didn't know I needed, and this kind of had that for me. I know some people were maybe complaining a little bit that there wasn't as much gameplay as promised, perhaps, but all of even the CG trailers that I saw looked really interesting. There was, of course, stuff that I didn't care about in lulls in the show, like when they were talking about Fallout 76 and the Elder Scrolls Online and Sea of Thieves updates. Even though they look quite good, it's just like, okay, those are established franchises. Of course, they're going to be there that Microsoft owned. But it was the world premieres, as Microsoft loves to say, and how much was on Game Pass day one that I really enjoyed.
I think the thing, as a wider thing, again, before we get to like specific game stuff, the thing that it made me think of is the future that both companies are planning for. If you compare what PlayStation's planning for and what Xbox are planning for, PlayStation seems to be the twin prong approach. It's either massive AAA games in the vein of something like a Last of Us or whatever, with a massive production budget. There's a whole thing doing the rounds at the minute that internally they demand 90 on Metacritic, which obviously invokes a certain level of polish or graphical style or whatever it is. We'll see how those games will shake out. And a live service future. They've invested a lot in Foam Stars and Fair Games and the various tech around that, and getting Bungie to analyze them and whatever. And Matterfall.
Matterfall?
No, the other one, the Marathon. The reboot of Marathon will be in that vein as well. That seems to be Sony's whole thing. Big AAAs and also live service stuff. Xbox's thing, and you saw the worst of it with Redfall, is letting the devs do whatever, quote unquote, whatever they want, like in a wider sense, and a bigger variety of gameplay mechanics, art styles, whatever, and then it's all financed by Game Pass. And because they have a certain amount of people on Game Pass, they can afford to free up the creative risk side of it, and they don't need to demand the 90 on Metacritic. They can do stuff that is just a really good 7 or an 8 out of 10 or whatever. And overall, this is just right now, we have no idea how it's going to pan out across the next, let's say, the rest of the generation or going forward. I massively prefer Xbox's approach. I'm only talking about approaches, though. So we'll see how it goes.
That's it, because the proof is in the pudding, right? Because for as hyped as I was from Xbox's showcase, their recent track record, Scott Tilford, is not great. Like, you mentioned Redfall there, obviously Halo Infinite before that. They have, of course, made big AAA games that I love. I'm a big fan of the new Gears 5 especially is my jam. But for as promising as all this is, I'm hesitant to fully back them because they are yet to fully deliver something on the level of Sony, for me, at least right now. But that said, I think they had a better conference than Sony. I thought the games were more interesting. And man, we always say it, but Game Pass is the best deal in gaming.
By far.
And what's so great about Game Pass is that if you have it, it makes the games in showcases like this that you might not necessarily be attracted to initially more appealing, because you know you're going to be able to play them without that financial risk, I get to see something that might not be what I like on paper, but looks a little bit interesting. And rather than saying, oh, I might get to that one day and then never getting to it because it still costs money, I get that access point because it's, quote unquote free because I'm paying for this service. I get to try games that I wouldn't otherwise jump into because of that price barrier. And like you said, sometimes that leads to maybe a lack of quality because it's content first over the quality that's going into it. They want people on the service, but I think for conferences anyway, it makes it more exciting because, you know, I'm not necessarily a hardcore racing guy, but I'm going to play Forza because it is free on Game Pass. It is day one on Game Pass.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you've already paid for it anyway, so you might as well. And I think that obviously right now Xbox literally are in catch-up, and I'm only talking hypotheticals. I'm only talking about a potential future where Sony's live service stuff is established and all their games feel the same. Because we've already many times identified the Sony formula, the over-shoulder camera, the light crafting mechanics, the semi-open world, whatever. There are things that point in that direction. It point at them being the next Ubisoft, and then you get that tired and do something else. So that's all I'm talking about is potentials. Obviously, that shines a big old angelic light on the Xbox stuff and hopes for the best, because you could end up with a future of Xbox that is just 20 different Redfalls, where they're not actually monitored that well, and then I don't think anybody's going to want that either. But I think overall, they did a good job here of just saying, like, this is what we're doing. This is our approach to the industry. You know, and earlier in the year, we had Hi-Fi Rush that was just shadow drop. Nice, solid little game, 7, 8 out of 10, designed to be finished, not designed to have a monthly pass or whatever. There's a way, for me, that I think that benefits the player in a way that Sony's live service future wouldn't. And it's not, I totally get Sony shooting their shot because they're way out ahead right now. And that's fine. But I think that in terms of the Xbox showcase, the reason it seems to be that a lot of people are super positive on it is remembering why Xbox used to matter. And it used to be a variety of titles. It was that whole 360 era. And I think there's a lot there that it's not going to win them the generation.
No.
But it's very, very strong, especially when they have like 10% of the market share right now.
I think that's a good point. It was the most 360 feeling showcase they've done in a while. And I've been a fan of Xbox's recent showcases. Like the last two I really enjoyed. I think the 2021s in particular was good, if I am remembering correctly. But here, like you said, you've got those returning franchises. You've got those new IPs that are coming. And more importantly, how many years have we spent in this room or a room like it or working from home saying, when are we going to finally see what all of these studios that Microsoft has bought are working on? And I felt like I finally got a glimpse of that here. I didn't get stuff that I might have wanted, like an update on State of Decay 3, Gears 6 or anything like that, but I got to see what In Exile was working on. I got to see more from Avowed. I got to see a bunch of other titles that we're definitely going to talk about, and that was really cool.
Well, my thing with Avowed was, like, I wasn't expecting that game to almost play like Bulletstorm, where you're, like, booting dudes across the landscape. And I was like, okay, that's a really cool, more innovative, more immediately playable way to contend with the Bethesdas. You don't even need to contend with them because they're in your wider family, but a way to be distinct. Obsidian, forever in the shadow of Bethesda. In terms of the optics of that company, I absolutely love Obsidian. And I'm always wanting them to be recognized on the same level, if not above Bethesda. And so for me, the way that the gameplay came across was really solid. And for me, that was just emblematic of the Game Pass idea. I was going to say promise there, but I feel like it's just the idea of it. Because right now they're out there saying that they're going to be doing 4 major first-party games every year. They initially said they would have like 2, I think it was a few years ago. They couldn't maintain that, so doubling it and trying to stick to it is a different thing. But overall, like, that conversation on in-engine gameplay or gameplay in general, I think is another reason that people were a bit disappointed with. There's some people who are a little bit disappointed with it. I wasn't, because I was like, Fable, it says in-engine. Oh my god, that's a big old well-rendered Richo Ayoade doing his thing. I thought in-engine is like a nice middle ground of the CG stuff from the PlayStation side and something that was maybe like a lesser production budget on the Summer Games Fest side.
Yeah, me too, man, because I mean, even that Fable one, it looked at least that what we were seeing, like you said, it definitely was in-engine, but it might even be a cutscene in the game itself, you know, and then it did feel like we got like a little bit of gameplay towards the end with the character running away from Richard Ayoade's giant and stuff. So to me, they struck a nice balance of at least trying to represent what the game's going to look like and not having proper CG trailers where it's like, okay, the game is not going to look anything like this. This is, you know, just their visualization of what the game could be and its themes and its atmosphere and all of that stuff. Same with Avowed. Like, I thought Avowed, like, that seemed really gameplay focused of a reveal, which was great after we saw the CG trailer a few years ago. I'm jumping between the two games now, but for me, Avowed looked like great. It looked like how I expected it to, almost a Skyrim-esque fantasy game by Obsidian. But what Obsidian said since has been really appealing. Like, they've said that initially they wanted it to be like a Skyrim killer. It was going to be their big open world fantasy game, where they've since not scaled it down, but certainly scaled it down in terms of the ground mass that you're covering. It doesn't seem like it's open world anymore. It seems like it's a bunch of different areas, kind of like how Outer Worlds handled it, where it gave you hubs and mini open worlds rather than one big one.
Dead Island 2, baby.
Dead Island 2. Yeah. And I like that because, like they said in their post-trailer interview, it means they can focus on depth rather than just the sheer breadth of the game or the sheer scope of the game, so they can go deeper with their choices, which to me is something that Outer Worlds did lack. I loved the polish of that game, but it wasn't up there with New Vegas in terms of the agency you had as a character or the stories that you were involved in. I would prefer a smaller landmass with more interesting stories than a bigger one that's more sparse and more focused on gameplay loops.
Which is a perfect segue into what Bethesda are building, because Starfield, I think they said it's like 1,000 or 10,000 planets or something. And obviously the go-to with that is to worry about how procedurally generated they are. Is it going to be another No Man's Sky situation? And there's been a lot of conversation around how authored those planets are. And that was one of the biggest things they wanted to nail down. There was a separate Starfield Direct after the Xbox showcase, which we both tapped out of after a while, just because you want to experience some of it when you go in fresh.
That's literally it. It wasn't because I thought it was bad. I thought it was too good. Yeah. It was too good. And I wanted to experience, especially like the character customization and your first mission. I want to do that fresh because I'm already sold on it, man. I kind of was a few years ago after the first trailer. Like it already sounded like something I'd be interested in. And to see them, yesterday, at the time of recording, address the idea of how are they going to address the fact that they have 1,000 planets? How are they going to make it feel curated or interesting? To me, it works on that level because, it's almost so far removed from what Avowed and the Outer Worlds was doing it's like a completely different thing. Like the pleasure of this game presumably is going to be as much in like exploring these uninhabited planets and just seeing what's out there as much as it is taking on missions and getting better loot. Like it's that sense of exploration that you get from a game of this scale that I'm looking forward to. And it might end up sparse, but I mean, I love Mass Effect 1, Scott Tailford, right?
Me too.
And I love the planets that you can drop on in that game, even though they are kind of all the same. And there's not much variety. And there's one base on each one. It's just that kind of almost childish wonder that I've been striving for since Mass Effect dropped, and obviously No Man's Sky tapped into it. Now Starfield feels like it's doing it on a bigger budget. That I cut it a lot of slack, perhaps wrongly, but it's so up my street that I can't help it.
No, I thought that it's one of those things where I was like, this looks like the most robust Bethesda game they've had in a long time. Looks very, very polished. They've obviously had to take the time to make sure it's like worthy of like an Xbox first party game. Some of the character animations, interactions, some of the dialogue bits, like that's where I was like, it's still a Bethesda game. It's still that engine underneath.
Absolutely.
But overall, it is with Bethesda. It was always the scope. It was always the, oh my god, how have they built this much stuff and made it feel authored? Like for as humongous as Skyrim is or was, it always felt authored. It didn't feel like any part of it was procedurally generated, even if there were parts to the landmass that were like that. And that's the thing that I think will carry it over the top. Like now they finally, after like 10 years, have a game that you should buy a series system to play.
Yes.
Like in theory.
Well, the proof's in the
looks
pudding.
good though.
Because I mean, we can sit here and say, this footage looks polished, but this is Bethesda we're talking about. When have they released a polished game in their lives? Literally never. You want to hope this is the one.
Yes.
And everything they showed was promising. But the proof will ultimately be there day one. Because I mean, Redfall looked polished, and then look how that turned out.